Okay. Okay, because sometimes they say it's still, theirs isn't set. I will now call to order the Monday, November 28th, 2011, informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of you here at Carnegie Town Hall and those watching us on Channel 16 and at siouxfalls.org. We'll begin our meeting today with City Council open discussion. We have no staff report. Is there any City Council open discussion? I do have one item that I'd like to begin discussion on. At last week's informational meeting, we started discussing council legislative priorities. All of you should have received an email from interim city clerk Sue Roust, and I will turn over the discussion to lead it to Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Councilor Aguilar. She only had responses from 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, and so I guess the first thing I would say is that if you have concerns legislatively that you really want the City Council to be a part of, that you send us email or get with us in some way so that we can make this part of the resolution. Our goal is to have this ready for when we meet with the legislators and the school board and the county boards, those kinds of people, when we meet for breakfast in the middle of December. So, Councilor Aguilar, remind me of the timing. We need to pass some sort of resolution on the 19th of December.
And that would still give us time for the City County School Board meeting to have our priorities available to us to speak to at that meeting.
Right, exactly. So I would just briefly run through the things that were sort of common in the 4 responses that Sue got. The first one is a general statement from the South Dakota Municipal League regarding the importance of local control, and I think that that's going to be sort of that overarching theme for us. And then a couple of things, 3 things that Councilor Brown and I agreed on. One was, and these are all from South Dakota Municipal League policy, number 88, supports legislation to allow street improvements to be specially assessed against the area benefited by the improvement. Number 49 encourages a standard to be developed and to increase the rates for 911 fees. Number 65, Department of Energy and Environment and Natural Resources and the legislature to work on designating the entire Big Sioux River Basin as a water source protection area and to establish a management plan for the allocation of water in the Big Sioux River Basin. And number 88, supporting legislation that amends street improvements to be specially assessed. Oh, no, sorry, I repeated that one. 88 was one that we agreed on. Then number 49 is the 911 benefit numbers, but it also is a core belief of the South Dakota Municipal League, number 345, and so that's something to keep in mind. Then a couple of other things from other councilors that were not necessarily repeated among us were supporting the Highway 100 project, looking at weight limits and sizes of trucks in town, and stormwater, the stormwater retention ponds that Sioux Falls uses pretty extensively. Public Works Director Mark Cotter is involved with that. And exempting municipal projects from sales and use taxes. In addition to then the one, it's number 20 on South Dakota Municipal League proposed policies regarding state surplus laws and how they would affect the zoo animals. And then supporting the other one that doesn't have a number yet is supporting the use of voting centers and e-poll books. So I guess if you have comments now, there are things in particular that you're excited about or want us to support, or if you want to think about it a little bit.
Councilor Entenmann.
Does leadership have any idea when we're going to get the list from the administration?
You know, we've gotten bits and pieces from the administration. One was the 911 fee that came from Police Chief Barthel. He also is interested in doing something about the growing of synthetic marijuana, which may or may not be something that we want to deal with. As Sue Rouse told us last week, there's already sort of a generic state law that kind of covers all sorts of new drugs. The voting centers one is from our own Sue Rouse, and then Jill Franken from the Health Department wants us to talk about requiring state registration for family daycare providers caring for 7 to 12 children. Okay. So those are the only ones we've heard of from administration so far.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Jameson.
If I remember right, over the years we've narrowed it down to just a handful. Mm-hmm. Is that what we intend to do again? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd like it to be one page and kind of a quick step-by-step through, so it's easy to deal with legislators. The ones I didn't mention, I apologize, were both pretty critical to what we've been doing. What came from Councilor Jameson, denying liquor licenses because of past underage violations. I don't know how far that would go, but it may be something we want to hit. And then encouraging state support for water projects like Lewis and Clark. So.
You read right from my mind.
Pretty big list, though, you know. So I guess I'm looking for input. I would gladly kind of shepherd this, but I'm not going to make the final decision on it. So think about it. There's an email from Sue Roust in your inbox. Look at that again. If you want my color-coded version, I would send that out. Do you want to see the one where we sort of agreed on? Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, okay.
Okay, and then we have to be ready to decide next Monday.
Okay.
Is everyone okay with that? So that we have the resolution either on the 12th or the 19th. We may need to whittle it down even further. But if you would do that, thank you, Counselor. Mm-hmm. Any other council open discussion? Just a reminder that the Charter Revision Commission meeting will be held this coming Wednesday, November 30th at 3:30 here at Carnegie Town Hall. City Attorney Fifley, did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Madam Chair, the Commission will be seeking public input over the course of its meetings, and I'd encourage any of the public, if they have some ideas on how to improve the functioning of our city government. The charter is basically our constitution. If they have some ideas they want to share with the Commission, I'd urge them to watch for those upcoming meetings. Thank you.
And it's my understanding that if we have something we want to propose, we can do it in writing.
Yes, we sent out a press release, and it's on the city website as well. They're encouraging written input. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to kind of streamline the process, they're encouraging people to give that at least 3 days in advance of any meeting. We're scheduled our first meeting for this Wednesday. As we get people's calendars together, we're going to schedule more through January and present a report to the council at that time.
Okay. Councilor Urbanbach.
Some of us haven't ever seen a charter commission work. Can you give us some ideas for, as citizens, how we, if there's something we're interested in maybe seeing change in the charter, do we have to write it up? Do we need it to be in legal language, or is that something that the commission would help a citizen work with?
Well, that would be something that certainly they would help you deal with as going forward. On SiouxFalls.org, there are all the meetings over the last 3 or 4 years of the Charter Revision Commission are all accessible and viewable for the public. If they want an idea of what the Charter Revision Commission does, they can certainly watch any of those meetings. All the agendas for the last 4 years or so are also on there. And so you can do a quick digging to find out exactly the workings of the commission.
Good, thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
If I could, David, the idea is that the council has the ability or the council approves the findings of this commission.
Well, there's a couple ways, Councilor James, a couple ways that something can be presented to the voters in April, Councilor. It can be either through what the Charter Revision Commission adopts, and also the City Council can propose legislation for voter approval in that April 2012 election as well. But essentially, it would be a report to the council from the commission, and it would go on the ballot for April.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Erpenbach.
Just to clarify that, then, council does not have influence over what the commission is going to put on the ballot.
Again, there are a couple ways, Councilor
Council can do
Erpenbach-
their own way.
Yes,
but
they can do their own, or the commission can also do their way. What's been the standard practice, from what I've seen, is that the council has quite a bit of input to the commission themselves.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So it would be my suggestion that if the council has, individual councilors have something they want to bring forward, it would be my recommendation that they bring it to the commission. But we as a council also have the ability to put something forward on the ballot. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Rolfing.
Directly after this meeting, we have a land use meeting, and just to go through the agenda very quickly, we have some information from Erica Beck on some TIFs that are coming up, and zoning board adjustment notification with, I'm not sure whether Jeff or Mike is going to present, maybe both of them, Jeff, and that'll be great. And then a reminder that we have our first urban agricultural task force meeting this Friday at 2:30 here at Town Hall, or at Carnegie. So we're looking forward to having that, and that should get us started.
Councilor Jameson.
If I could, I'd like to wrap up a little bit of our audit committee meeting that occurred last Tuesday. Rich Oaksel is here, and if you don't mind, I'd like to have him just give us a quick synopsis of the audits that we reviewed and where we're at, and he'll give us a further report later on.
Rich Oaksel, lead internal auditor. There were 3 reports approved by the committee: fuel internal controls, school-based health clinic, and neighborhood redevelopment. I have a request put in today to present those at the first 2 informationals in January. And then they also approved or passed on the 2012 annual audit plan. That has to run through an evening meeting and be adopted by resolution. So I will be working with City Clerk's office to get that scheduled probably in December. So the full council will weigh in on that 2012 audit plan.
Any questions for Rich? Councilor Brown.
Rich, while you're there, do you want to preview a fiscal committee meeting next week and what you'll be talking about?
Yes, I've met several times with the HR director and the city attorney. We have a fraud policy, a citywide fraud policy to discuss with the fiscal committee. We've tweaked a few things, and I think we're ready for a discussion with fiscal. And then I think at some point down the road that would be presented to the full council for adoption. So,
Any other council open discussion? If not, we'll go on to today's presentations, and we'll begin with Director of Finance, Tracy Turbeck, giving us our October monthly financial report. Welcome, Tracy.
Good afternoon. Thank you, councilors. As I have in past months, with my monthly financial report update, I'll be reviewing some of the indicators of local economic activity that we track in the finance office, as well as provide an overview of the general fund revenue and expenditure position year to date through the end of October. And then I've also added a slide on the year-end projection. When we, following the wrap-up of the 2012 budget, we immediately went to work with the departments to update or freshen up their projections for their spending for the remainder of 2011 so that we can have a good feel for where we anticipate finishing the year. So I'll provide you some information on that. The first economic indicator that I want to review is the unemployment rate in the Sioux Falls MSA. The chart here, the lines represent 2009, 2010, and then the green one is 2011. You can see that for most of 2011 we have been better than either one of those 2 years. Certainly 10 was better than 9, and 11 is showing considerable improvement over 2010 as well. The latest data point for 2011 is the September unemployment rate that shows a 4.1%. And just very, very recently, the October data has also come out. It's not reflected on this chart, but it is dropped again down to 3.9% for the Sioux Falls MSA, and I might mention too that the rate here in Sioux Falls has not been that low or below 4% since 2008. So that's certainly a very positive trend. It's been trending positively all year, and it continues to do that. So we're certainly pleased to see that. The second indicator that we do like to track is the monthly building permit values. Again, this chart reflects 2009, 10, and 11. And you can start to see the seasonal variations, kind of a trend appear from year to year, and when the peaks and valleys are for issuing building permits. The 2011, of course, depicted in green for the month of October, was right on the money for where we were in October of 2010, but the year-to-date numbers are continuing to outpace last year. The year-to-date values for 2011 through October are at $256 million. A year ago through October, we're at $248 million. That's about a 3.2% increase over 2010 for those 10 months of the year. Again, not a blistering growth rate, but certainly a positive trend that it is starting to improve. The last economic indicator that we do track is the sales tax. I've got, again, a couple of slides on sales taxes. This particular chart, again, shows 2009, 10, and 11. 2011 is the green line, has been trending upward. These represent year-to-date numbers, so each month we add on another month's data and plot that data point for the year-to-date. In this case, October, the 10 months of 2011 show a 2.6% improvement over the first 10 months of 2010. So that does include those audit adjustments that you've heard me talk about in the past that do, in this particular case, do distort the percentage, the growth rates somewhat. We had two large audit adjustments, one a positive one in early 2010. In January of 2010, we received a large audit payment that related to a prior year. And then in June of 2011, we had a large negative audit adjustment for a prior year. So those do tend to throw these numbers off on a year-to-date basis. We are, however, projecting that these kind of unfiltered or unadjusted numbers will end the year with a positive growth rate of about 3%, or about $3 million higher than what we had budgeted for 2011. So again, that's certainly a positive reflection on our sales tax activity. I believe, a better indicator of retail activity locally is the 12-month rolling growth rate. And this chart shows a 12-month growth rate starting in October 2009 through October of 2011. So you can see in the early months, those were very negative, significantly negative numbers throughout the end of 2009 and the first 8 or 9 months of 2010. We were still on a 12-month rolling basis, still seeing our sales taxes decline. In September of 2010, we did cross over into positive territory, and the pace of growth picked up considerably on that 12-month rolling basis throughout the last quarter or so of 2010 and then the first quarter of 2011. And you can see that it shows continuing improvement since September of 2010. The growth rate has leveled out at around 5%. In recent months, you can see it's been relatively flat, but it's not a bad place to be. A flat 5% growth rate is still very, very solid growth for the sales tax receipts. So that's, again, a very positive indicator. Now switching gears a little bit and updating you on the revenue with an overview of the revenue and expenditure picture for the general fund. The chart on the left is a month-to-month year-to-date accumulation of all the general fund revenues with 2010 in blue and 2011 in red. And you can see that 2010 revenues have been, for the most part, outpacing each on a month-to-month basis the same month in 2010. So we are We are seeing growth in 11. We are certainly on target with our budget numbers overall, and we're projecting by year end $117 million in revenues for the general fund, which is about $2.8 million over the original estimate for the general fund revenues. On the expenditure side, again, the blue represents the monthly expenditures for 2010, and the red is the monthly expenditures in the general fund for 2011. We are, with the expenditures as well, we are certainly on target for the balance of the year. Of course, the great unknown is the snow removal costs. So far, we've been doing very well, but Mother Nature can certainly turn on a dime, and we can spend a lot of money in a hurry if it starts to snow this last month or so of the year. We are projecting expenditures of about $118 million by year end, and for purposes of projecting the year-end expenditures, we are assuming that all of that $1.8 million in snow removal supplement that was recently approved will in fact be spent. So we're trying to be err on the side of caution, I guess, assuming that money won't be available next year. But if the recent weather trends hold out, we will have some of that money left as well. So for the general fund year-end projections, and this is my final slide, I wanted to give you a comparison of where we started the year with in terms of our original 2011 budget and contrast that with where we are projecting that we will end 2011. And you can see the revenues, we originally projected $114.2 million of revenue. We're anticipating that actual revenues will come in at $117 million. And that's largely due to the sales taxes coming in higher than what was budgeted. So we'll see, we expect about a $3 million total revenues over and above what was estimated in the original budget. The next line is the total expenditures for the general fund. You can see we budgeted originally $118.4 million, and we're projecting to spend about $118 million by the end of the year. And again, that assumes that we will spend all of that additional money that was appropriated for snow removal. So that additional funding for snow removal is included in the projection, but not obviously in the original budget number. So that takes us to the bottom line. The original 2011 budget, we had anticipated a use of $4.2 million in unreserved fund balance to carry us through 2011. And the projection now indicates that we will use about $1 million, so significantly better than what the original budget had provided for. That's about $3.2 million, better than originally anticipated. And again, that does assume that $1.8 million for snow removal will be spent. So if there is some of that money that does not get spent before the end of the year for snow removal, we'll actually use less than $1 million in unreserved fund balance. That would leave us looking forward and in comparing that unreserved fund balance amount, and we're projecting that at about $40.7 million. That would bring us in at about 32% of next year's budget. So we would finish well above that 25% target that we're shooting for, and that's on a forward-looking basis as well. So projecting that we'll be in very, very good shape. So that's my final slide. I would certainly be happy to try to answer any questions you folks have.
Any questions for Director Turback? Councilor Brown.
Tracy, remind me what months the property tax dollars come into our budget. Is it November or
November is the second half collections, right? So we have not; those are not reflected in the October report yet.
And in the spring they come in. Is it April?
May.
May.
We received them in May. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Jameson.
If you could remind me what the projection was that we used in 2011 for the sales tax growth, and then what did we also use for 12?
2011 budget was based on zero growth. 2012 budget is based on a 3% growth.
So in fact, in 2011, our budget sales tax growth is almost, to date, 5.1. Am I reading that right?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
Year to date, the sales tax growth rate is what?
Over the actual 2010 collections were up 2.6%, and we're projecting that by the end of the year we'll hit 3% growth for 11.
That's the number I should be not referencing, not the 5% that you have. And
Right. The actual dollars that we're seeing come in the door that is reflected in the 2.6%. The 5 or 5.1% growth rate, that 12-month rolling growth rate, is really the underlying taxable sales that are occurring in 2011. The 2.6 is a smaller number because of those audit adjustments that relate to 2009 or 2008 or years past. So that 2.6 is being held back because of that.
Right.
If we had no audit adjustments ever, we would be seeing a growth more along the lines of 5%. I'm hoping I'm answering your question.
I think so. Yes, thanks.
Counselor Karski.
First of all, Tracy, or Director Turbach, thanks for making the somewhat complex reasonably understandable. It does help quite a bit. It's a complex budget. Help me out to understand a little bit on the audit adjustments. And it's happened in the last 2 years. If we were to, have an audit adjustment and it was like 2009 and we're down 3-4%, how would that affect our general fund balance?
Let me, first of all, I should maybe explain a little better about how and why those audit adjustments occur. We do see audit adjustments every year. They're commonly occurring. The State Department of Revenue sends auditors out and audits vendors and retailers every year. And invariably, we will see additional collections come in typically as a result of those audits. The oddity that we've seen the last couple of years is the two very significant audit adjustments that have caused me to want to bring it up and point it out, because it has significantly distorted some of the growth numbers that we're seeing this year because of the large inflated number that we saw in 2010, and then this year we saw one going the other way. So when we look at our current 2011 growth rate, there's kind of a double whammy built in there. 10 was higher than what the taxable sales would have reflected, and 11 is lower than what the taxable sales would have reflected because of those audit adjustments. Now, there was a second part to your question, and maybe I'll have to have you repeat that.
Well, once the audit occurs, is that money out of our general fund balance then?
If it's a negative adjustment, the state withholds that money from us. So the next time we get payments twice a month from the state, and if they've got an audit that's closed out and we have at some year in the past received more than what we were entitled to, they will withhold that from our payment. In the case of positive adjustments, which are much more common, they'll just add that to the check that they send that month, even though those taxes should have been remitted 2 or 3 years ago. So that's why I prefer to filter those out when I'm trying to get a better feel for what's really going on in the local economy, to take out those things that really relate to a year or 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Brown.
A couple more, Tracy. If you could address, December sales tax mean a lot to this city. Could you talk about what we see in December and what impact that has on the city budget?
Well, it is significant. It might not be as significant as you would think, I guess, and someday maybe I'll chart that out for you so you can see kind of maybe on a pie chart or some kind of a chart how much actually comes in each month. But certainly it's very significant, although the variations from year to year aren't as great as what you might think in December. A lot of holiday shopping takes place in November now, so that has tended to smooth things out a little bit. A lot of people will wait until after Christmas to do their shopping or spend their gift cards if they, that kind of a thing. So it's still very significant. I expect if we look back over the last 5 years, December would probably be the largest sales tax collection month, or sales occurring in December would be the largest of the 12. But,
and then, do we do any sort of sampling to see what's going on in December in terms of how it aligns with the national trend? This year we're hearing that it was a record spend. Do we check? I would imagine most of our sales tax dollars in December would come from the mall. Do we check with retailers to see what's going on out there?
We have not done that in the past, and I know
there's no reason
when we've attempted to get that kind of information or anything from the state, it's like the Department of Revenue is really a black box, and this in terms of releasing any sort of information from particular communities or particular vendors. That is just protected like the Holy Grail in Pierre. They just won't release any kind of information that would allow us to determine how a particular business is doing. But I mean, we could certainly, I suppose, look at that on taking some initiative on our own and contacting individual realtors or retailers to find out how their sales are comparing. But I don't know. I mean, the best information that we get is the dollars that come in the door.
Sure.
And although we have to wait a month or so to find that out, it's not like it isn't good information when we do get it.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thanks again, Tracy. I always appreciate these. I'm like, Dean, this makes more sense to me when I look at them this way. I wanted to look just real briefly at the more detailed monthly report on page 10 because it's wrapping up right now, the River Greenway improvements. I'm looking at it and wondering, is that project doing what we expected it to do? The numbers look right to me, but is there something I'm not understanding in how that project is working according to the budget that we appropriated for it?
I can try to answer that. I think in terms of the overall plan for the River Greenway and what was expected to be achieved and just on what kind of a timeline, I think those are kinds of questions that are probably better directed at the Parks Department, and I know that they're on your schedule to provide a River Greenway project update next month. But I can say, in reference to the budget for the project, the budget is on track. I know there was reference made recently to the project being over budget. That's not the case, and you point out on page 10 of the October report that the overall project budget is about $6.2 million, and as of the end of October, there was a budget balance, a remaining unexpended, unencumbered balance of about $2 million, and I did update those numbers. So we've got more current information because these are as of the end of October. But as of today, we still have about $1.5 million remaining in that project budget. So I think there may have been some perhaps confusion about the original construction contract and change orders that took place because of some unforeseen conditions relative to the bedrock and the need to use footings for some of the river wall. And those are things that I guess I would prefer you wait, if you're okay doing that, wait until next month when they're here to give a project update, and the experts that are working on a daily basis with that project could address kind of the whys behind that.
Then would you remind us, Tracy, if we want to look at this, if I don't have it printed out, how would I look at this on a regular basis? How do I keep track of this? Is there a place online maybe that I could look at this report on a regular basis?
This report is online, and at the same time you folks get it from me, it gets posted on the city's website. All of our monthly financial reports, monthly financial updates are on the Finance Office webpage for the last several years. So anyone who wants to can certainly find that very same information on every project that's going on. There is a line on that report for the project, shows the budget for the project, what's been spent, what's encumbered or under contract, and what the balance is. And you'll find that that's the case on every single project we have going.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Director Turbeck? Councilor Brown.
Just a follow-up invitation to the entire council. The fiscal committee through the years has looked at this, and if there are other things that you want to see in this report, we can be in contact with Tracy and put those in there. So let us know if there are things on here that you want to see that aren't in it today.
Anything else for Director Turbeck? Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
We'll now have a presentation on the Pettigrew Heights Bright Start Coalition findings and recommendations by Nicole Berger. Welcome, Nicole.
Well, good afternoon. I'm back the second week in a row. Last week we presented on the youth needs assessment, and I said I'd be back this week to talk specifically about the findings regarding Pettigrew Heights, and just wanted to give you a little background and information. What is getting passed out is just an executive summary of just the background of what I will go through and some of the recommendations that came out of what the project did in the last year. And basically this project was funded through Volunteers of America Dakotas, and it was phase 1 funding through the state of South Dakota. And basically the state of South Dakota received SAMHSA funding, and other states across the United States got money to do what we call a SIG money. And so basically in the last year we've been encompassed and lived in this world of looking at either underage consumption or binge drinking. And so what we were funded for was specifically to look at the Pettigrew Heights area. There was 3 other coalitions within Sioux Falls, one to look at the greater of Sioux Falls, and then one to look on the outskirts of Sioux Falls. And so the goal in the last year was then to have all 3 of our coalitions to sit on each other's coalitions, but then to work on our specific areas and neighborhoods. So I'm going to talk specifically about the Pettigrew Heights, obviously. I was hired as project director. As some of you guys may or may not know, I've worked for about 10 years. I worked down at the Bowdoin Youth Center, and so it was a great fit to, of course, become project director and work specifically on this project. And basically then we recruited, and we had to have 12 sectors to be sitting on this coalition, and that came from whether it be the media, residents from the community, youth, business owners, church members, anybody that wanted to be involved with the project, but all 12 key sectors had to be involved with the project. One of the things involved with the project that we had to state was to have a vision and a mission statement. So I think this is really core is I may have been the project director, but it was really the coalition that made some of these decisions and recommendations. The vision statement was alcohol consumption and the problems that can be related to the usage of drinking alcohol will decrease in Pettigrew Heights. The mission statement was to empower the community to examine the individual and environmental contributors as they relate to alcohol, and then to formalize and implement a plan for the neighborhood. And they chose, we had to choose between underage and binge drinking, and they chose underage drinking among 12 to 20-year-olds, and those were the 2 categories that had to be chosen. The plan for the neighborhood was outlined in a strategic plan. As we talked about, we had to hire an outside evaluator, which we hired Mountain Plains Evaluation. And they worked with us throughout the project to make sure we had everything that we did had validity, and we made sure that we had the evaluation requirements met throughout the entire project. We did a community needs assessment to make sure that everything we did, the community was ready, and if we weren't ready, what needed to happen. We also did what we called environmental scans, which we went into different parts of the neighborhood, the businesses, and worked with key stakeholders to do scan surveys and interviews to see what they thought the problems were, what they thought the factors were, the contributing factors were. And so we also did the youth needs assessment, which we presented last week and talked about that. We also worked with law enforcement and other key folks within the city and the county to kind of get some of the data, and then the goal was at the end of the project to put it together and make the recommendations. And then when we had the recommendations was what were the key areas and what were the presenting problems. So some of the presenting problems that came about with some of the surveys is we took 2 months of the police law enforcement calls. We did February and July of this last year. 25% of all the calls in Pettigrew Heights are alcohol related of some sort. There's a 63-page document, which I brought it, but I figured an executive summary was a little nicer for you. If you want to leisurely read that, I can certainly get that sent to you. But the 63-page document states more specifically in details, statistics, and an overall very detailed plan if we were to have gotten funded, which we'll get into, if we would have gotten funded, what we'd plan to do. But basically, if you look at February and July of this last year, 25% of the calls were alcohol-related, whether that broke down into minor consumptions, alcohol calls, violent calls. It broke it down into different parts and variables. If you look at the surveys we did with the youth, with the parents, or just the key stakeholders that we talk about, we had the average age of alcohol use of the Pettigrew Heights youth was 12.1. We know that that is quite considerably younger than the average age nationally and within the state. The youth parent in Pettigrew Heights, for a male's parent, so not the female, but a male's parent, 16.4% of the male's parents have a drinking problem, as they identified, which is almost double than the female parent, is what they identified. Almost 30% of the youth identified that they drank before the age of 13, which is higher than the national area. Over a fifth would say that they did or did not care. So basically, they didn't disapprove or approve whether or not drinking daily was a problem. So we talk about perception of harm. So using that data, using that research, we did a capacity survey to kind of look at the strengths and the needs of the neighborhood. We looked at doing, of course, the grant application, and we submitted it to the state. Unfortunately, only a certain amount of the coalitions were funded, and unfortunately, we were not one of the coalitions that were funded. They funded the two other coalitions within the broader Sioux Falls. We are very specific to Pettigrew Heights. We're still very committed to the project, and so is the coalition, and been meeting with other city leaders and other funders possibly of looking at the project, but we also feel that the data and the research should not go unfounded. And so we wanted to present that to you today. Some of the areas that we want to address in the project were retail access to alcohol, social and community norms that are accepting and tolerant of underage alcohol use, low perceived risk of harm of alcohol use, promotion and advertising of alcohol, and social access to alcohol. We had three main objectives: to decrease retail access to alcohol, decrease social access, and decrease the amount of promotion and advertising of alcohol in Pettigrew Heights. An example would be, as we talk about recommendations, but an example is there's 3 alcohol billboards in Sioux Falls, or there was when we did the environmental scan. The one alcohol billboard is in Pettigrew Heights. The second alcohol billboard is within blocks of Pettigrew Heights. And the third alcohol billboard is within about 15 blocks of Pettigrew Heights. So I think it's very interesting, and the coalition found it very interesting, that 3 of the alcohol advertisements that are within the Sioux Falls city limits are all related within Pettigrew Heights area. So that was one of the things the coalition had recommended, is whether we wanted to look at promotion and advertising of a different sense, to look at why is that neighborhood specifically being targeted. Working with retailers in the Pettigrew Heights on alcohol placement in stores. We know that with working with the youth and law enforcement that worked with us on this project, we know that single can use of alcohol, and many of our youth were going on beer runs, as they would say it, which were not legal beer runs, as they would take the alcohol and run. But looking at alcohol placement in stores, if you had a single can used, or a single can and it was alcohol and it was in the front of the store, they could just take it and run, and of course not pay for it. And obviously they were underage. So obviously to look at where that placement was at in the stores, number one, and to look at, should they be selling single cans. So that was another issue. Compliance checks with retailers in Pettigrew Heights. Last year there was one compliance check done in Pettigrew Heights. One. And there was one business that failed. Prior to that, there had not been one done within a year. So looking at increasing compliance checks within Pettigrew Heights. Regulate restriction and promotion on advertising of alcohol in Pettigrew Heights. In doing the environmental scans within Pettigrew Heights and doing advertising and promotion, we found out that a 30-pack of beer at some of the local retailers was cheaper that you could get than any other place within Sioux Falls. It was $2 cheaper. So if you look at pricing and promotion, you could go to Pettigrew Heights and get it cheaper. Of those 276 youth surveys that we did, quite a few of the youth said that they would go to Pettigrew Heights in order to get alcohol, A, because it was cheaper, and B, because they could pay someone to get the alcohol for them. Work with retailers on pricing regulation, which we just talked about, restrictions on specials on alcohol within Pettigrew Heights. The fifth one I know is controversial, but increased taxes on alcohol. With all the youth that we work with, they even said, I just did a group this morning with a bunch of youth, and 8 out of 10 of them said, if you increase the taxes on alcohol, that might decrease us wanting to purchase it. Shoulder taps and compliance checks when working with law enforcement. Shoulder taps is part of one of the trainings we went to. It's communities, mobilizations on the change of alcohol, and working with law enforcement with that and the compliance checks. Also working with law enforcement with a number of the increased noise ordinance violations within the Pettigrew Heights as it relates to underage consumptions in Pettigrew Heights. We wanted to work then with the media and marketing campaign for youth, parents, and the community regarding alcohol. A lot of the parents, the retailers, and other folks do not know the consequences if you provide alcohol to an underage person or host a party, social hosting parties, or any of that. Some of the youth, some of their recommendation was, of course, increase taxes to get rid of the single can use, to increase the criminal consequences where a lot of times they might have a minor consumption or a DUI and it's pled out and it's the consequence doesn't seem so great for them. And so some of those were, of course, that's a 63-page document summarized very quickly for you. And so it's a very small area. We know that, approximately 3,900 people live there. We also know that it is the area where it is one of the most talked about areas in the community. We know that it has a lot of strengths and a lot of talents and a lot of gifts, but we also know that it's an area and a neighborhood that has a lot of crime and a lot of violence. In doing some of the scan surveys and doing this evaluation, that obviously if you look at the calls, a fourth of this relates to alcohol. So we wanted to bring these recommendations and findings to look at, just to have so you guys could have the information to look at, maybe if you look at the alcohol issue and maybe look at the recommendations to maybe see how you guys can have an impact on that particular community. And I'll entertain any questions or comments at this time.
Questions? Counselor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. I know you were under the gun last week. I appreciate you coming back and helping us walk through this as well. Talk to me about if the funding for Phase 2 has been denied, what happens to the program? And you have all these recommendations and all these studies you've done. What happens now without additional funding?
Well, part of Phase 2 is in here. So Phase 2 is part of going with the recommendations. And so it's really, whether it's presenting in front of you today, is here's what was some of the recommendations. So is it possible for the city to possibly look at implementing some of the recommendations? Is it possible for certain other programs or entities? Is there other funding out there? I know as an agency, we are trying to look for other funding from other entities to see if there's possibly anything else to look at, whether it's alternatives for some of the youth that's within that neighborhood or look at other revenue sources. And so we haven't given up hope, but we know that we've come into some stumbling blocks with that. We, in speaking with the state of South Dakota, they have went through their own changes in the last year with some restructuring and some redivision. We know that we can apply for funding. It's kind of like you sit out or we have to wait, so you have to wait a whole another year. And then by that time, you have another year of kind of evaluation and research. One of the great things of this project is there is an evaluation component done throughout the entire time. So the data and research, every component was being analyzed. So as in funding for it currently, it's not, and so we're continuously to pursue it. It'd be great if someone would pick it up and help fund it, because there was a core group of 15 people that met and worked on this project pretty diligently, residents, youth, people from that neighborhood and community that wanted to work on changing that neighborhood. And so I would hate to see that go to waste. So I guess I'm trying to still do things to empower and speak for the coalition.
If I might, one more question. I usually take pretty good notes, and I think I messed this one up. The average age of youth alcohol use in Pettigrew Heights?
12.1.
12.1 years. 12-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that's higher than the national average. What's the national average?
I have it right here.
Sorry.
It's over the age of 13.
Okay.
And, you know, with some of the people, and if we wanted to get into logistics, you know, there was a part for comments and different points, but we know that youth were doing many, making some really poor choices in order to get their alcohol. They were getting it from strangers. They were exploiting their bodies in order to get alcohol. And so we really want to look at making a positive change and impact into that neighborhood so that youth don't have to make those type of choices.
Thanks. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Nicole, thanks for being here. Are you sharing your findings with the police department?
Yes, they actually, I met with Chief Bartell, and so he actually has a copy of the full 63-page report, and I met with him, and then Officer Greg Schmidt sat on the coalition.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Jameson.
Nicole, if I could recommend, even though you may not be receiving a grant, you know, one of the ideas that we just talked about for the council and priorities for the upcoming legislative session was to give the city some teeth in enforcing those underage drinking violations. So even though the city today doesn't have the ability to affect the outcomes of those renewals, you still have time to address it with your state legislators and encourage them to give us the tools to help enforce those rules and create a positive outcome in your own little neighborhood. You still have a chance there. I would encourage you to contact those people, and I think if you don't know who they are, we can help you find them. And we would, I would sign a letter of saying, yes, we support this effort.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nicole? If not, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Informative. Is there any other business to come before this body? If not, the Land Use Committee meeting will begin at 5 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.